Well, welcome, Christine. This is our second Thankful Thursday with you, and we're here to learn all about more about Anusara and what Anusara is, and a little introduction to cosmology and karma, because obviously you're coming to Christchurch in a few weeks, and we're really keen to share your knowledge with the yogis down here. So, welcome. So pleased to have you back.
Thank you so much, Christina.
Yeah, no, thank you.
It's great.
Mm.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to tell people if they want to be reminded a little bit about your history to check out the other Thankful Thursday and learn a little bit about the time that you've spent teaching and how you got to Anusara. But you've been a certified, experienced certified Anusara teacher now for a long time. And tell us, like, what is the difference with tell us a little bit about Anusara.
Okay, well, it was founded actually in 1977, a long time ago, by an
Wow.
American called John Friend. And he ran the organization. He actually was initially trained in the Iyengar school, as some of us were. And he took some of the Iyengar ideas but really built a whole new system of practicing Hatha Yoga. And one of the things that he did was he became involved in the Siddha Yoga path, which is one of the non-dual Tantric paths of yoga. And he brought that non-dual Tantra into the Hatha Yoga practice of Anusara. And then and it grew very big. It became global. And then in 2012, he left, and it became a teacher-led organization. And it always had this community emphasis. But now it is led by teachers. The whole organization is led by teachers. So there's no head honcho, if you like. And there's no hierarchical structure in the sense of running the organization, because our board of directors actually has teachers who are entry-level teachers on the board of directors, as well as the experienced certified teachers, the certified teachers. We have various levels of registration for Anusara. And so we have a range of knowledge and experience, and that's how a community should be. That's what I think, anyway. That we have a really an overview of teachers and a spread of knowledge. So that's the administratively. But to come back to that non-dual Tantra, it was unique at that time for a Hatha Yoga practice to be founded in non-dual Tantra, because at that point, many of the yoga schools were still focusing very heavily on classical yoga, the yoga of Patanjali, as their, I guess, philosophical foundation for practicing. But actually, Hatha Yoga doesn't have anything to do with classical yoga. I might have said that before, but Patanjali's yoga was about the mind, but Hatha Yoga actually arose in the Tantric tradition. So it became really foundational. It was the structure upon which the Hatha Yoga rested, and was interwoven into the Hatha Yoga. So I guess in terms of the Hatha Yoga itself, it's an alignment-based practice. We use props, as they do in the Iyengar practices, for support and for modifications. There are no set postural routines, as you'll find in some of the other schools, but we do use sequencing principles. But I guess the three main areas of uniqueness to Anusara are first that it is a community-based organization. Have what are called 5 universal principles of alignment. And these principles of alignment start from what we refer to as the highest in the Tantric understanding, but they also relate to how muscular and how the muscles work with the body and how energy moves through the body. So in those 5 principles, there is huge scope for instructing them. It's not that you have to say the same thing over and over and over again to teach these principles. You can find out, and we normally, I tell my students, practice at home, because that's how you'll find out how to work with these principles yourself, simply by finding ways for yourself to achieve what the principles are there to achieve in the body and the movement of energy in the body. So that's the second major difference, is that we have the universal principles. And the third major difference, as I said, is that it's founded in non-dual Tantra, as compared with the duality of classical yoga, Patanjali. I hope that explains.
Oh yeah, it's actually a really good explanation. I actually didn't know that it went back to 1977 when it started, because obviously I kind of got in the 2000s, and it was the fastest growing yoga school at the time, I think, that I got involved with, Anusara Yoga. But I just want to pick up on a point that you made with the universal principles of alignment and how there's so many ways you can teach them and experience them in your body. Because I remember having this moment with inner spiral, which is one of the universal principles of alignment, like probably 8 years into my practice at home, and going, I finally get it, you know. And it's not that I hadn't gotten it all at that time, but you know, you just have that moment of feeling that, yeah, it's powerful.
Yeah, and I think that aha moment comes, like you can take the physical actions, but it's when you feel the result of those physical actions in the body, and even through the mind, that the aha moment comes.
Yeah, there was this wave.
That's my feeling.
Yeah, exactly, a wave of freedom, or something that kind of came into the body and the mind. Absolutely. So I keep that. This is not a secret. Anyone who knows me knows that my favorite part of Anusara Yoga is the non-dual Tantra. I just love. I could spend listening to Carlos and yourself and many other teachers talk about it. So can you expand a little bit on that, because I know it's a really big topic, but you know, what do we even mean when we say that?
Well, it's a Tantra itself is actually less a philosophy and more a set of practices underpinned through a cosmology or a metaphysics. Excuse me. And it arose pretty much around the medieval period, and then it branched out into various schools of Tantra, or traditions of Tantra. So the Anusara practice doesn't focus just on one of those schools, although I guess for me, because my teacher is very close to the Kashmir Shaivism school of Tantra, so that's what I tend to investigate myself. But the recognition school and various other schools that exist within Tantra, we also draw upon them as well in our teaching. So it's and they are a set of practices. There are hundreds of meditation techniques, for example, in Tantra. And as I said, it's very clear from the historical texts that Hatha Yoga arose out of that Tantric understanding too. So when we say non-dual, what that means is that we don't see that there is an agency out there somewhere that is I guess impacting our lives or somehow organizing our lives or whatever. What is seen is that at the highest there is a supreme power, if you like. There's a universal consciousness. I tend to describe it as a universal consciousness. And that universal consciousness is not bound by space and time in its pure form. But as we, and this is how the cosmology describes its movement into the human form that we know, that at some point along that continuum from unbound consciousness to limited consciousness, which is what we experience, there is a veil, and that veil is called Maya. And Maya is both an aspect or a power of that unbound consciousness, because for consciousness to experience, it must limit itself, it must veil itself, it must hide itself. So Maya is what hides this unbound nature, so that it can experience itself as everything in this universe and through us. So we are not separate from that consciousness. We are actually, we all hold what I'll call Shiva within us. And yoga's job is, or the practice of yoga, is to start releasing those limitations so that we do know ourselves as pure, unbound, supreme consciousness.
Yeah.
But everything in this world, even the most extraordinarily mundane, is an expression of this consciousness. That's the non-duality. So we're not separate, because yoga is often described as a way to unite mind, body, and spirit. But in Tantra, that doesn't make sense, because we are already united. It's just that we don't know it. We've forgotten.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's where the recognition school comes in. Our job is not to bring things together because they're already together. It's to recognize that that's the case.
And every time I hear that, it gives me tingles. But I was reflecting on this last night, thinking about our conversation today, and I think I've had this, the tattvas and the layers of reality and Maya and all of that explained to me very many times in teacher trainings and immersions, etc. And I got it one day during a class, a yoga class, and I think someone, and it's just funny how, I guess my point is that I love what you say, and it sounds so beautiful, but if you didn't quite understand it, it's okay, because it took me many times to keep coming back to it, because it's quite a shift of thinking, isn't it, to go from we're separate and this is who I am and I'm not connected, to actually I'm a unique expression of this limited, unbounded consciousness, and I'm here so that consciousness can, come to know itself, and there's this veil protecting me from remembering that's who I really am. Yeah.
And it took me a long time too. I mean, I've taught it numbers of times, and every time I teach it, I get a better grasp of how to teach it, how to bring it back to a more simple explanation. But one of the things that my teacher, Carlos, says, that if you want to know where you're going, because the cosmology gives you this, I guess, a list or a chart or something, from the highest unbound consciousness to the limited individual. And our journey is from the limited individual back into unbound consciousness. That's the yogic journey. Always has been, actually. But if you want to know where you're going, know where you came from. And also, if you're doing various practices, know at what point along that list you are targeting in your practice. For example, pure soul. What practice targets that purity of our individual soul? Well, that is pure witness consciousness. So understanding at what point your practices are touching these, what we call the tattvas, or the principles of reality, is, I find it really useful.
So do I. And it's like this manual for connecting to the wholeness and the beauty and the joy of who you really are. Because you're right, Tantra are just practices and methods to help you remember who you are. Because we unfortunately forgot.
Tantra actually means a tool for expansion. It's a tool for expansion.
Yeah, brilliant. I love that. I love how you just explained that, if you want to, open your, connect to your soul, then these are the practices that you would do, and it's great. What about the perspective of karma from the tantric perspective? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Karma's had such a bad rap, hasn't it?
Hasn't it? I know. This is why I love the tantric perspective on karma, because
karma's normally seen as being negative, and the result often it's talked about as the result of cause and effect. It's not the result of cause and effect. That's a principle of physics, cause and effect. Yeah. And sometimes it's seen as the universe sort of dumping stuff on us. None of these viewpoints are true, because the universe certainly doesn't do anything to us. It doesn't have any agency by itself. The universe is just this physical entity that obeys the laws of physics. That's it. So karma doesn't have anything to do with the universe either. What it is the result. Actually, the full term is karma phalam, which means the fruits of karma, and this is our conditioning. Mm-hmm. So when we have experiences, when we act, when we have experiences, there's often an emotion. There's usually an emotion attached to that experience. When that emotion is unresolved, it's tucked into the subconscious. And if other experiences come up which are similar, then that seed in the subconscious grows, it sprouts, it becomes more powerful, a more powerful I guess indicator of how we're going to act in the future. So karma is what stops us from recognizing who we truly are. So I mentioned Maya before, this veil. Part of that veil, of course, is cosmic. It's Shiva, Shakti, Shiva being consciousness and Shakti being the power of consciousness, which have to be together. They can't be separated. It's part of their power, or Shakti's power, to veil. But also it is part of our power to release our conditioning.
Yeah.
Because it's our conditioning that drives our lives in certain directions. It makes us act in certain ways. So this is what karma is. Mm. It's simply, or karma phalam, it is simply the conditioning that happens through language. As soon as a baby or a toddler starts to speak, the conditioning starts. Yeah. And we also, in the yogic terms, we also bring into the next lifetime a package of conditioning from the last lifetime or lifetimes that we want to work on, that we're going to hopefully start to release. So yoga from the very start and this is not necessarily tantric, the group of yogis called the Shramanas around 800 BCE, and that included the Buddhists and the Jains, they used different techniques to release conditioning, release karma, because there was that understanding even then that it was this karma that stopped us from knowing ourselves truly as pure consciousness, the light of consciousness. So right from the beginning, so Patanjali, for example, used the mind to clear the mind. He wasn't using the body. He thought the body was actually quite disgusting. But he was using the mind to clear the conditioning or the karma. Hatha Yoga uses the body and other techniques to clear the conditioning. Because when we move prana through the body, this conditioning sits in the subtle channels of the, pathways. They're not channels at all. In the subtle pathways of the body. And so the prana moving through the subtle pathways clears them out. But of course, once we stop doing those sorts of movements, we can step out of the yoga class and something happens and we go straight back into our conditioned responses. So this is why Anusara's other unique thing is to use theming, so that there's an extra input into refining and hopefully clearing those emotional responses through the language that it's used.
Yeah, and it's so powerful. It's really powerful. You know, the thing that I love about the perspective on karma is that it's empowering, right? It gives me the opportunity to not be a victim to my history or what I'm doing today, and it gives me that ability to say, oh, I can clear that, or I can take control of it, or I can no longer have it run my life or run the course of my life. So it's such a wonderful perspective from that, empowering the individual that you can do something about this.
Yeah, I think, it brings the responsibility firmly onto us. The way that we act, the way we choose to act. Now, sometimes, of course, karma is so deep, as in post-traumatic issues, that it's buried so deep in the subconscious that it's actually very hard to shift it. But, for our day-to-day things, I'm to this, I'm to that, or she's like that, or she did that to me, or we can deal with those things. And we have a responsibility to deal with those things, because our yogic journey is about evolution, individual evolution. Yeah. It's not about evolving society, but the fact is that when we evolve as individuals, society it's for the betterment of society. So individual evolution, that's our responsibility.
So true. Yeah, that's what I love about, that's why I chose yoga as my path, right? I was telling this story, this is a real tangent, but no, I'm not going to tell the story, but it's just, yoga is the path that helps me continue to grow and evolve. And it blows my mind that there's no end point in sight. Like, we just keep growing. So you mentioned, like, you do the class, the energy moves through your body, you shift some karma, then you walk out, and then boom, life pulls you back in again. But one of the powerful tools that Anusara gives the student is this gift of theming and the languaging that the teacher uses during class to really help. So can you expand on that?
Sure. Theming is really a general term for an attitude, a key quality that is woven throughout the instructions for alignment and movement. And I mean, it's not easy thing to do. It's something else to learn. So for beginning teachers, it's well, how do I get this person into the pose, and then how do I then move a key quality through there? So it does take a little while to learn, but the benefits are enormous because we choose key qualities. My key quality this morning when I taught was gentleness, and we were doing standing poses, which can be quite ungentle at times.
Quite strong.
So and a couple they're quite strong, yeah. So learning to create gentleness by holding some of your attention inside, or softening inside, or releasing the corners of your eyes or whatever. So learning to hold some gentleness as you do these strong poses brings a sense of calm to that strength. So the theme might be gratitude, for example, or openness, or awareness, or expansion, or there are so many key words that we can use, and the way we do that is to make it to give it context. We generally tell a little story, just a couple of minutes, little story which includes this key word and how it's affected a certain situation. So this morning I told a story about having spent the last few days with 3 10-year-old boys, and at my age, it's quite a challenge.
I think at any age.
So 2 10-year-old boys and 1 10-year-old girl, and what I noticed in their behavior, apart from the shouting and the scrapping and the screaming in the pool and all of that, were these moments of pure gentleness in these kids, and how they could drop into that with no problem whatsoever. They just dropped into this gentle relationship with each other and with us, the parents, and the grandparents. So that was my little story. And then I talked about how gentleness is not meek and mild and weak, that actually gentleness is very, very strong. So that it's not the physical strength so much, it is the strength of heart, it's the strength of mind, it's the strength of connection that comes through gentleness. So in expanding on that word, I brought it back to what you could call the psychology of what we do. Because dealing with karma, with conditioning, is a psychology. We use the body, but we're also using the mind to hold ourselves in a certain place, a certain attitude, so that even as we practice these strong things, we're not thrown around by that practice that might be quite challenging. We can come back to that gentleness, which is what we did this morning. And in something like gratitude, for example, so you remind your students, can you be like you've got this working body? Can you be thankful for that? Just to keep pulling people back to something, a quality which has a fullness to it already. So it's not going to steam out as some sort of criticism or judgment or something that's going to rock their boat mentally. So the choice of language is very important, how we teach and how we weave this theme through, but it's also very powerful. So in letting go of these unresolved emotions, and this is the interesting thing about a yoga practice, you'll probably find that most of your students come out of a practice feeling much better than when they walked in.
Yeah.
And that's primarily because they've shifted some of that conditioning, some of that karma.
Yeah.
So they just feel better about themselves.
It's amazing. Every time I practice yoga, I finish feeling better. And even last night I was contemplating it on my yoga mat. I thought, I've just been moving for 5 minutes and it already feel better, you know, and I intend to be here for another 25. Like it's just, it's amazing that how that movement and that intentionality. And you're right, like I've had students who've come back months later, who may have only popped in for one class and then come back months later, make a point of coming up to me and saying that story that you told and the message that you shared throughout the class changed my life. Like I was, you know, like I left that class a different person, and I've held it all these months later. Yeah, because you know sometimes we go to a therapy session and then we walk out of the therapy session and that's a boom, drawn back in straight away. We're like smoking, whatever it is. Yeah, it's
So
powerful.
yeah, the themes help us keep centered. So to be centered is not to be in a particular place or in a particular state. All it means is that we hold that sense of attention within us as we act, so that we're not thrown around. So the words that we choose need to be words that bring us back to our center.
Yeah.
To that sense of not being so the great sage Abhinavagupta talks about in terms of internalization and externalization.
Yeah.
Externalization when everything is poured out through the senses. Internalization when we hold an awareness within us as we act. And it's that internal awareness that actually burns the karma. Yay!
Yeah, exactly. Yay!
So that's what the theming is there to do, is to hold our center as we act so that we are burning karma as we act.
Powerful. Hey?
And then hopefully stories say, yeah.
And that's what I remember you said in the last conversation that we had, like it's mysterious. Like we actually really don't know how it's working, but it works. You know, you leave a yoga class feeling better, and if you keep coming back, it holds and accumulates, and all of a sudden you've created this whole new identity and a whole new life and a whole new person, almost, depending on how committed you are. Yeah.
Yeah, you can also walk out and say, oh, that was a bunch of rubbish, I'm not coming back.
Exactly. And that
and that happens. So in a sense, people have to be ready for this sort of teaching or this sort of practice, I should say.
Yeah.
But there are plenty of people who are ready, who just haven't come across it yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I think if you know when you're ready, when someone says, hey, you should try you should try this thing, you should try this yoga practice, or I'm going to a weekend workshop. And you know the thing that I found, the great thing about Anusara was that the weekend workshops, and obviously you're coming to Christchurch and you're coming to run 2 weekend workshops to teach about the cosmology and to teach about karma and hopefully burn some karma for some people. But that's never our intention. It's just a nice side effect. But so the workshop is I found when I was practicing, was a really great way to really dive deep and immerse myself in the yoga and in the practices, and then kind of go back to my weekly class or my it just boosted my practice really nicely. I found. So I would encourage people.
When you do when you do 2.5 hours of a class and there's time to explore what you're doing, then it becomes you tend to hold that better. You hold it and it becomes more integrated into your practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when you spend some time learning about the philosophy behind the 2.5 hours that you did, in the morning and the afternoon, you hold it even more, and you have these little aha moments, and yeah, it's powerful. It's really great. Well, I can't wait to see you in person in March. It's going to be, yeah, I think I said to you before we started recording that selfishly, this is, I just want to have 2 weekends doing yoga with you in person. So we created these workshops. So I'm so pleased that we get to share this wisdom with whoever chooses to join us then.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. So thank you so much, Christine, for all the teaching and all the wisdom that you've given me. I just, and the time that we've spent working together, it's just been phenomenal. I really, really, really appreciate my teacher. So thank you, and namaste.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you.
Namaste.